While everyone is overhyping the next iPhone coming out in September, a new little leak, a new little rumor popped up that I've been very pleasantly surprised by. There's a couple ideas spreading that Apple will be refreshing the Apple TV at this very same keynote, where we'll be getting the new iPhones, all three of them, hopefully the third generation of Apple Watch, and now rumored a 4K update for the Apple TV. Yes, this is long overdue. In fact, it's kind of embarrassing that Apple hasn't supported 4K on their current flagship Apple TV, given they make 4K and 5K monitors, and their iPads and MacBooks are all far above 1080p, and yet the Apple TV can only do HD. No 4K support, which is bizarre. So I'm glad that they're catching up, hopefully. Really hoping this rumor is actually true. There's no looks of how it will be redesigned. It'll likely look exactly the same way it does now, but this will be primarily a spec improvement. I'm guessing it'll have USB-C and HDMI port just like the one does now, but instead of having the A8 chip, which is what it has right now, and that's also very old chip, and for powering something as big as your TV, you're gonna want something with a little more oomph. And this rumor is saying it will have the A10 Fusion chip, the same processor chip that they put in the new generation iPad Pro. The same processor chip that can support a Pro motion display. That's 60 frames a second. These displays, I can assure you, look amazing. If you've never seen the new 10.5-inch iPad's display, the refresh rate is incredible, and I'm glad that a processor capable of doing that is being brought to the Apple TV. That makes so much more sense. This, of course, would allow for the support of 4K and HDR. HDR is a fancy thing companies like to slap on their TVs and cameras to say that it looks better. Really hard to notice though, honestly. You can only really notice HDR if you put it next to a regular non-HDR format, then you're like, oh, okay, yes, that one's more colorful. But unless you do that, it's really kind of hard to notice. But it's a feature nonetheless, and 4K is a tad more noticeable, especially in the TV realm. I know I've said some bad things about 8K in the past, but 4K I think is a lot more noticeable if we're talking on the 50-inch to 60-inch scale. But I think a big problem that was keeping Apple from making this TV switch to 4K support was, first of all, having the processing power to render 4K files and also supporting 4K files. Luckily now, though, Netflix and Amazon Prime are supporting 4K content. They have been for a while, but that awkward last guy to show up to the party was iTunes. Not a lot of people still use iTunes, but there is actually a leak someone discovered that shows that a couple movies now, not all of them, but a couple of them are now being labeled in the 4K format on the iTunes store. If it has a purchased history, you cannot buy them in 4K, you cannot view them in 4K, but it shows that some newer movies coming out are starting to be labeled with that 4K tag, meaning that perhaps this September, iTunes is now going to support 4K content. So all of your movies are going to look just as good as they do in the big screens in most local movie theaters, except now condensed down to your living room format. But even with the Apple TV switching, I kind of doubt this is going to bring a new wave of TV buyers. Just about every tech company out there is now supporting 4K stuff. Now we got, you know, the Xbox One S, the Fire TV, the 4K Google Chromecast. There's a lot of 4K support, but I still know most people out there, especially people from older generations, can't really see the difference between 1080p and 4K. And if they do want to make that switch to 4K, they're not going to notice it, but they're going to be paying for it. And that's going to discourage a lot of the consumer market from making that switch to 4K. However, because Apple supports such high resolution content across all of their devices, in the current day Apple TV can output the same resolution as our iPhones, it makes sense that you'd want to give those pro users, the people who do notice the difference, that option of switching to up-res content that looks far better. And of course, with the new A10 Fusion chip, gaming content can get even better. There are games on the Apple TV store, and I'll admit that there's a lot more than I thought. And of course, there's some people out there who like to pair game controllers to the Apple TV. There's not a lot of them, to be honest. Very probably like the most unpopular console out there, if you can even call it that, but it's an option. And I think one of the things keeping a lot of developers from truly taking full advantage of the power of their games is because the Apple TV, as of right now, is very underpowered. And I've suggested multiple times in the past that Apple really needs to put more powerful processor chips in the Apple TV so that the games on it can actually look and play really nice. This is primarily a media consumption box, so don't expect this thing to compete with the Xbox or the PlayStation. But with an A10X Fusion chip, I bet you could get some 1080p at 60 frames a second gameplay. Not on games that look very good, but I still think it'll be out there. And if anything, I think it's time for Apple to start investigating the game console industry again. I've reviewed both the Xbox and PlayStation in the past, and they both have really major problems that Apple, I think, would conquer easily. Like, none of them want to ditch optical drives or hanging up on discs. We know Apple wouldn't be okay with that, so they would have the smallest console. Probably the most pricey one too, but imagine wireless charging controllers. They sit on little docks, like our Apple Watch sits on a charger dock. You could charge it with Lightning if you wanted to, or USB-C. And all the AAA game developers gamers would know that Apple sheep are all gonna buy this console because it's new and shiny and from Apple, so there'd be incentive and a rush to design as many cool games for that Apple TV as you could, the Apple TV Pro, as I would call it. But I don't know, I know they're not doing that. I'm sure that design-wise this will look exactly the same. It'll come with the same remote, but now it'll support 4K content and have that A10 Fusion chip, which will make games and apps and whatever you want to run on it look great, and you can take full advantage of your 4K televisions for those of you out there who do have it, but that does not include me, sadly. I'm very satisfied with my 1080p TV as it is, and I feel like investing in a new 4K TV and 4K Apple TV will be a lot of money for something I'm not really gonna notice, because at the end of the day, you also need internet to stream that 4K content, and you have to pay extra for 4K content on Netflix. Probably not worth it for me, but we'll see someday. Really hope this rumor is true. It sounds like a stocked full keynote. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below about the 4K Apple TV, and should Apple make a gaming console, even though they've not done that in years. Yes, I know they've done it before. They don't like to talk about that. No one likes to talk about that. That's a weird chapter in their history. This is your Apple Sheep here, and I will see you in the next one.